Hey, welcome back to True-Moto-Resto, and today we'll take my new valve shimming tool and we'll attempt to remove the shims. Okay, today this is going to be the first step, I guess we'll call it, in shimming, reshimming the valves for the CB900. And the first steps, I've got to take the valve shims out for cylinder 3 exhaust and cylinder 2 exhaust. And in order to do that, I was waiting for this this little valve shim tool, which I have to insert down in here, and then lever these things down, leave the valve buckets down, and leaving the shims loose so I can pop them out. So that's the plan for today. I want to get I'm going to do these shims first because they're a little easy to access. I'd like to get the hang of it on these ones, and then number 2 cylinder is a little more difficult because there is a tachometer drive in the way, which apparently makes it a bit more difficult, and from what I'm reading I might have to pull those out from the front. But anyway, so the process, I guess there's 2 ways to do it from what I understand. You can either rotate the valves, rotate the camshaft so that the cam lobes are pushing down on the buckets, insert the tool, and then rotate the camshaft, move the lobes away, and then this tool will take the load of the buckets, leaving the shims loose. Or you can rotate the camshaft so the lobes are out here, and then use the tool to lever the buckets down and then remove the shims. Either way, the recommendation or the necessity is to there's a little cutaway in the bucket, and I think I need that cutaway facing this direction, so then it's easier to pop the shims out. Different things that I've seen and read as to whether or not to use a magnet, so I'm going to try and not use a magnet. So the manual that I have explicitly says do not use a magnet, and the only thing I can guess is that using a magnet, they're concerned that you're going to end up magnetizing the shim, and since the shims are riding right against the cam, this is not shim under bucket, it's like a shim over bucket, I'll call it. Maybe they're concerned about the fact that if the shims become magnetized, they can stick to the cam lobe and maybe they can get jettisoned out of there. I don't know. So if I can get away with not using magnet, I won't use the magnet. And so once I get them out, we'll see what size they are. I already did the valve clearance check, so I know what these are the 2 cylinders I need to adjust. So I've got that recorded. I'll then record and measure the size of the shims that are in there. And then once I know that, I can calculate the size of the shim that I need to put back in, which I still don't have because 1, they're hard to find, 2, they're not cheap. They're not cheap and I am, so I'm just going to wait until I know what sizes I need, and then I'll just order them up, and then I'll put these ones back in, because you can't rotate the camshaft with the shims out of the bucket because you damage the buckets or the camshaft. And then I'll move on to the other side. So that's kind of the summary of what I'm going to try and do today. All right, so I think I'm gonna use the lever method, just because I'm kind of mildly freaked out about the idea of rotating this camshaft with the buckets depressed by the tool. I mean, I know the manual says you can do it okay, but I just don't need any valves. If I make a mistake and I rotate something too far or the wrong way, I don't know. This just seems like the method that's fraught with the least amount of peril if I do it this way. So I guess the idea is, if you look at the tool here, there's a ridge down the middle, and that ridge kind of has to sit between the buckets. So on the outside edge, I guess the bucket is held down by the outside, and then it leaves the shims free. So there, I think that's where I need to be. Okay, let's. Those buckets seem to want to rotate on me a little bit when I rotate that, so. There. So I needed to basically put a 90-degree rotation. There's those little cutouts on the buckets. I rotated them 90 degrees that way, so that when I push the tool down, they kind of wanted to rotate back. So I'll see how that works for me. Well, that worked. That's one shim out. Well, success on one. The other one seems to be a little more difficult, but we'll get this one measured up and we'll see what it says. So I've got that one done, so I guess now I have to. Seems to me getting this back in is more difficult than getting it out. It seemed to go in okay. The other one seemed to be a little more stubborn, so I'm not sure if I have the shim tool in there correctly, but I'll try again. I don't want to force it. This bucket here on this side doesn't seem to want to, or the shim doesn't want to pop out. So I'm not sure if the tool is too far onto the shim for some reason. It worked okay on the other one. I got it finally. There she is. Got it. All right, so I've taken both of these shims out and measured them. So now I know what size shims I need to get to the clearance I'm looking for. I think the next step is just to rotate the engine once around, just to make sure those shims are seated back in there properly, and then I can move on to the other side. All right, this is cylinder number 2. Exhaust. So again, I'm going to just do the same deal here. So if I can pop out. That one out. There we go. Let's go measure this guy. Okay, so I got all my calculations done. Somebody sent me a very handy sheet for recording and calculating all of the valves that were kind of out of spec. So here's what I found. Generally, this tool works pretty well. I think the only real challenge that I had, a couple of times is when you put it in and you start to rotate. There's sometimes, I guess, depending if you have it sort of too far left or right, you might not release the shim. Let's put it that way. It might be caught up a little bit on the edge of the shim, but if you readjust, it's okay. So despite the manual saying don't use a magnet, I can tell you, as folks on the forums and on YouTube have said, yeah, absolutely need a magnet, especially for these two. Because this journal here is quite a bit wider because of the tack drive component that's attached to it. So you can't pull the shim out of here. You kind of have to pull it out of this side, and when you pop it out, and even actually I had it even on this one. Not that this one was hard to get to here, but it dropped into the oil bath at the front here. So Yeah, especially these guys, but you need to be able to use a magnet to pop those guys out. I couldn't actually maneuver anything down in this side to get the shim out. I couldn't use needle nose. The only way to get it out was a magnet. So that it is what it is, and that was what I found anyway. There may be others that are more skilled with tweezers than me, but there you go. So there are 8 shims that I need to change. And unfortunately, even when I change out when I took the ones out that I need to reshim, the sizes of those are not sizes I can use anywhere else, unfortunately. So I need 8 shims for 8 cylinders, for 8 valves. And once I get those, then I can get those swapped out. To be honest, it really was not a difficult thing to do. It was fairly straightforward. So I will say that in addition to looking at the number that actually was on the shim, I double checked everything with the calipers just to make sure. There was one I would say was a little bit different than the number indicated on it, but not very much. So I did allow and compensate for that. So I think it's always a good idea. Actually, in addition to the one that was out a little bit from the number, there were actually a couple of shims that didn't even have a number on them, or if they did originally, it had worn off for whatever reason. So definitely needed the calipers to get the correct measurement for those. Anyway. Okay, here we are about 2 weeks later. My new shims have arrived, and here's a view. This is where I got them. Precision Shims Australia. And Chris was very, very helpful. And the prices were very reasonable. The shipping was reasonable to Canada. And I don't think I got them any cheaper, even if I could have found a Canadian distributor. So would have been definitely more money out of the US. So grateful to Chris, and also appreciative to Tony for putting me on to him as a good supplier. So anyway. So now we're back to the task of replacing the shims. So this is the worksheet where I recorded all of the measurements and the new sizes that I needed for, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intakes, sorry, 7 exhaust sides that have to be done, and then 1 intake. And so what I've got here, this is just, again, my working piece of paper so I can lay out, these are the new shims for the exhaust side. This is the one new shim for the intake side. So I'm just going to kind of go at these one at a time. I'm going to put the old shims up here, and then I'll replace the new shims as I take the old ones out, and we'll get everything measured up again and make sure that we're good to go. And of course I dropped the shim, so now I'm going to have to use my magnet. I'm just kind of coating the new shim in a bit of motor oil here, just so when I put it back in, it goes in a bit easier, and it's kind of pre-lubed. I'm going to put the marked number side down so that doesn't get worn off by the camshaft. We'll see how that goes. And then once I've got these guys in, I'm going to measure, I'll re-measure the clearances. All right, so I finally got it. I just had to play around with getting the this particular bucket here wasn't getting pushed down, and this one was kind of over. The positioning of my tool was all wrong, I guess. So anyway, I've got them in. I've rotated the camshaft 1 full turn, and now I've got it positioned to check number 3 exhaust, and I've got a nice, a little bit of drag on there. Which is perfect. So I'm 0.13, 0.005, which is right where I want to be. All right, so on cylinder number 2, this is the one, as you can see right here, the cover, the clamp for the camshaft also includes the holding unit there, the drive unit for the tack, and so it's a lot wider, and so it's basically impossible to get this particular shim out through this side. I'm going to have to fish it out through the bottom, and maybe, just maybe, I'll also have to put it back in through the bottom. I think I did last time as well. So it's, yeah, a bit of a pain, but ha! Success! Son of a bitch, I got you. Golly. What a pain in the arse. Okay, so cylinder number 1. I'm trying to smack my head off the handlebar again. Jeepers, it hurt. Got the first one popped up there. And as before, that guy has to come around as well, it seems. All right, so here's where we are at. Everything is done. It didn't take me too long. I was wrestling pretty badly with a couple of them there. And what I've what I've come to learn here is if you get one of these tools, you've got to be so precise with its placement. If you get it just a little bit wrong, the edge of this will kind of sit over top of the bucket too far. So for instance, if you're over this way, just a little too far over, you can pop the shim out, but you're not getting the new one back in because it just starts to foul on the edge there. So be super careful with the placement of these when you put them in and you start to lever, because if you're just out a little bit, one will come out easy, the other one, it'll be impossible to get back in. So taking your time getting this thing placed properly seems to be the key to success. I mean, the casting on this stuff is pretty primitive. I'm sure it would work slightly better if it was a more accurately casted tool, but you know what they say, right? A good mechanic never blames his tools, so that would make me the tool. But anyway, they're all in. They're all within the fat end, the larger clearance of the specification. It's all nicely consistent, which I'm very pleased with. I did muck up a few of my measurements initially. My calculations, I should call it. This one here, for some reason, I'd calculated it at 2.68, and I should have gone up into 272, and instead I went down. So fortunately, though, I could take the one that I actually removed, the old one out of here, and put it in. So everything worked out in the end. And the other one that I did, I mucked up this one too. My calculation there, I was way off. Again, I went the wrong direction. But fortunately, again, I could take the old one from here and move it over. So everything worked out in the end. I didn't have to wait another 2 weeks for my mistake. I should have checked my calculations more carefully. Hey, shit happens. And now, next steps. Valve cover back on, carburetors back in. And then I can start the process of firing it back up. I got a new battery to go into it, get that charged up, acid in it and whatnot. And then once I'm happy with the way it's running, then I can kind of get to the meat and potatoes of this restoration and tear this entire thing down to a bare frame and all that kind of good, exciting stuff. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. It takes a microsecond to do it. I appreciate the comments that come through. Please hit that subscribe button. It's right there in front of you right now. Just click it, and it certainly helps. I'm hoping I make it to 1,000 subscribers this summer. That'd be super cool if I can get there. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.